The Curtiss-Wright SB2C Helldiver was a tragic disaster before it even got into the air. The original concept for the plane was for a carrier-based dive bomber to replace the earlier SBD Dauntless, but scope creep set in hard, which led to significant problems. The first prototype flew at the end of 1940, but there were major issues with the early examples of the plane, which led to accidents and crashes, even though production had already started before the testing and evaluations were done. This led to early versions of the plane being plagued with failures of all kinds. Everything from defective electrical systems, design flaws with the flaps, collapsing landing gear, and even the cockpit canopy jamming closed, preventing the pilot from getting out without help. The plane was so hated early on that at one point the captain of the USS Yorktown wrote in a report that the planes should be repurposed and used as boat anchors. The plane's poor performance and troubled development even caused a minor political scandal, and it's often blamed for the slow exit of Curtiss-Wright from aircraft production. Despite all of this, the plane was put into mass production quickly as World War II heated up, and the Navy needed more planes, even if they weren't very good. The early service of the Helldiver was problematic, and the plane was underpowered and difficult to fly, which led to many accidents, and earned the SB2C the nickname Son of a Bitch Second Class as a play on words about its designation. Over time, the Helldiver was upgraded, and some of the newer models did resolve a lot of the performance and safety issues, but the damage was done, and the plane has an enduring reputation as a lemon. However, even as the dedicated dive bomber role was phased out, the plane remained in service even after the war simply because there was nothing to replace it. A small number were exported to foreign navies and air forces, mostly upgraded airframes retired from the US Navy, and despite its bad reputation, it flew into the 1950s with some of the export customers. What we're looking at in War Thunder is the SB2C-5, a naval dive bomber and torpedo bomber at battle rating 3.7. There's a version of this plane in the French tech tree, and also a premium version in the Japanese tech tree as a reward from the Battle Pass season in early 2025. They're basically identical, and this review applies to both. The plane's primary armament is a pair of 20mm AN/M2 cannons mounted in the wings with 200 rounds per gun. The overall firepower of the guns is fairly low, but the individual rounds can still hit pretty hard on a direct hit, and you get a good selection of ammo belts. I usually take the Air Targets belt. The loadouts on the SB2C-5 are actually pretty good for a plane that's ostensibly a dive bomber. You can take dumb bombs mounted externally or internally up to 2,000 pounds. You can also carry unguided rockets or gun pods out on the wings, plus the plane can carry a torpedo. Now, in terms of its flight performance, this plane has some major shortcomings. The most obvious issue is that it's underpowered and fairly slow. Remember, it's a dive bomber, so high speed was never a big priority for it, and that carries over into its performance in War Thunder. Its acceleration is poor, its rate of climb isn't good, and its top speed isn't great either. Add to this that the weight of its weapons reduces its performance even further until you drop them, and in general, the Helldiver just gets a pretty bad flight model overall. The dogfight agility of the SB2C is similarly not very good. Its rate of roll is average or bad depending on flight speed, and it dumps a lot of energy in maneuvers, though the horizontal turn rate is okay at higher speeds. Plus, this plane does have one trick up its sleeve that you can use to great advantage. The dive performance is unsurprisingly excellent. The plane has effective air brakes and is highly stable and even fully controllable in a 90-degree vertical dive. In addition to the obvious utility for accurate dive bombing, you can use this tactically in air combat, which I'll discuss in a moment. When you take the Helldiver into air battles, it might feel at first like this plane is a hot mess. However, with some unorthodox tactics, it can be fairly effective as a points grinder. I'm gonna give you the big trick right up front. Take a load of bombs and climb towards the enemy base targets after you spawn in. If other bombers beat you to them, just redirect on a cluster of AI ground units or something. The performance of this plane is simplistic enough that you're frequently gonna get intercepted, and that's totally okay. Just roll over into your dive, full air brakes and cut the throttle and all that, and hope that the enemy fighter follows you. Remember, this plane is far more controllable in a dive than most of the other stuff you fight is, and if you don't get shot down before pulling up, it's actually pretty easy to get a quick reversal on whatever dove in behind you. Use your air brakes to control your speed as they overshoot, and really, I was shocked at how often it works when I was flying this plane out. In terms of actual air combat, you can use the gun pods if you want, but just keep the performance penalty in mind from having the extra external weight. The wing-mounted internal cannons are somewhat difficult to hit with, and the overall firepower isn't very good. But the individual rounds can still cause good damage, and when you actually connect hits, it won't be uncommon to see wings and tails fall off. In general, try to get practiced at getting a feel for when to use the flaps and air brake to force overshoots, and keep the plane's marginal agility in mind. Oh, and it might not be a bad idea to refresh yourself on gun convergence. Actually doing a dive bombing attack with the Helldiver does take some practice, but it's not too hard. With the internal bombs, you have to pull out immediately after releasing the bomb, or else it might strike your prop or something. Remember, no trapeze like on the Stuka. In close air support, you can be fairly effective with the dive bombing, but like in air battles, the Helldiver can be pretty vulnerable to interception after its bombing run, and the tail gunner has a really poor field of fire. Now, as a bonus, the plane can take a torpedo. You'll rarely get the chance to use it since ships are very uncommon these days on air battle maps, and in naval battles, the AAA picket is usually just an invincible wall of death long before you get into torpedo range, but it's fun to have the torpedo as an option anyway. Visually, neither version of the plane has any interesting paint jobs, but the default ones aren't too bad. No obvious errors on the 3D models or anything. Landing the Helldiver is pretty basic, and the air brake makes it easy to control your airspeed on final if you need to. You can drop the gear at a little over 300 kilometers an hour and flaps at around 250, plus it gets a tailhook since it's a naval plane. The cockpit on the Helldiver is not great. The visibility is obstructed, and I didn't care for the instrument placement at all. Really, I just didn't have a good time with this one in VR. To close out on the SB2C-5. This plane has really powerful air-to-ground weapons. It's excellent for dive bombing, go figure, and the Battle Pass version gets premium bonuses. However, it's not very good as a dogfighter, it's slow, the gunner's field of view is heavily obstructed, and the firepower of its internal cannons is low. The final verdict on the SB2C-5 Helldiver is that it's fairly basic as a dive bomber, but still useful as close air support or in the rare chance you get to attack ships. As an event vehicle, it's pretty unexciting as a Battle Pass reward, but at least that version is a premium. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you're gonna like this other one.